Join us as we embark on a journey through the pages of the New Testament, witnessing the miracles that defined an era and continue to inspire millions around the globe. From turning water into wine at a joyous wedding in Cana to calming the raging storm on the Sea of Galilee, each miracle reveals a glimpse of his divine nature and unending love. The following are the miracles of Jesus Christ. Turning water into wine. Scripture. John 2 verses 7 to 9. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now, and take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. Healing the nobleman's son. Scripture. John 4 verse 50. Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your son lives." So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. Healing the man with an unclean spirit. Scripture. Mark 1 verses 25 to 26. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. Healing Peter's mother-in-law. Scripture. Matthew 8 verses 14 to 15. Now when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. So he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. Healing many sick at evening. Scripture. Matthew 8 verses 16 to 17. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed. And he cast out the spirits with a word, and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, "He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses." First miraculous catch of fish. Scripture. Luke 5 verses 4 to 6. When he had stopped speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." But Simon answered and said to him, "Master, we have toiled all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net." And when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish, and their net was breaking. Cleansing a leper. Scripture. Matthew 8 verses 2 to 3. And behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, "I am willing, be cleansed." Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Healing a centurion's servant. Scripture. Matthew 8 verse 13. Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you." And his servant was healed that same hour. Healing a paralytic. Scripture. Matthew 9 verses 6 to 7. But that you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. Then he said to the paralytic, "Arise, take up your bed, and go to your house." And he arose and departed to his house. Healing a man's withered hand. Scripture. Matthew 12 verse 13. Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and it was restored as whole as the other. Raising the widow's son at Nain. Scripture. Luke 7 verses 14 to 15. Then he came and touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." So he who was dead sat up and began to speak, and he presented him to his mother. Calming the storm. Scripture. Mark 4 verse 39. Then he arose and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Healing the Gerasene demoniacs. Scripture. Matthew 8 verse 32. And he said to them, "Go." So when they had come out, they went into the herd of swine. And suddenly the whole herd of swine ran violently down the steep place into the sea and perished in the water. Healing a woman with an issue of blood. Scripture. Matthew 9 verse 22. But Jesus turned around, and when he saw her he said, "Be of good cheer, daughter. Your faith has made you well." And the woman was made well from that hour. Raising Jairus' daughter. Scripture. Mark 5 verses 41 to 42. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement. Healing 2 blind men. Scripture. Matthew 9 verses 29 to 30. Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, let it be to you." And their eyes were opened. And Jesus sternly warned them, saying, "See that no one knows it." Healing a mute demoniac. Scripture. Matthew 9 verses 32 to 33. As they went out, behold, they brought to him a man, mute and demon-possessed. And when the demon was cast out, the mute spoke. And the multitudes marveled, saying, "It was never seen like this in Israel." Feeding the 5,000. Scripture. Matthew 14 verses 19 to 21. Then he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitudes. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. Now those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Walking on water. Scripture. Matthew 14 verses 25 to 27. Now in the 4th watch of the night Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." Healing the Syrophoenician woman's daughter. Scripture. Matthew 15 verse 28. Then Jesus answered and said to her, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire." And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Healing a deaf and mute man. Scripture. Mark 7 verses 34 to 35. Then, looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, be opened. Immediately his ears were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke plainly. Feeding the 4,000. Scripture. Matthew 15 verses 35 to 38. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fish and gave thanks, broke them and gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitude. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets full of the fragments that were left. Now those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. Healing a blind man at Bethsaida. Scripture. Mark 8 verses 23 to 25. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, "I see men like trees walking." Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Healing a man born blind. Scripture. John 9 verses 6 to 7. When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which is translated, sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Healing a boy with an unclean spirit. Scripture. Mark 9 verse 25. When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you, come out of him and enter him no more." Healing a blind, mute demoniac. Scripture, Matthew 12 verse 22. Then one was brought to him who was demon-possessed, blind and mute, and he healed him, so that the blind and mute man both spoke and saw. Finding the temple tax in a fish's mouth. Scripture, Matthew 17 verse 27. Nevertheless, lest we offend them, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take that and give it to them for me and you. Healing blind Bartimaeus. Scripture, Mark 10 verse 52. Then Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. Cursing the fig tree. Scripture, Matthew 21 verse 19. And seeing a fig tree by the road, he came to it and found nothing on it but leaves, and said to it, "Let no fruit grow on you ever again." Immediately the fig tree withered away. Healing a servant's ear. Scripture, Luke 22 verse 51. But Jesus answered and said, "Permit even this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Cleansing 10 lepers. Scripture, Luke 17 verse 14. So when he saw them, he said to them, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And so it was that as they went, they were cleansed. Raising Lazarus from the dead. Scripture, John 11 verses 43 to 44. Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Loose him and let him go." Second miraculous catch of fish. Scripture, John 21 verse 6. And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. As we reflect on these incredible miracles, let Jesus' love and power inspire your faith. Subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories and teachings, and join our community in celebrating the wonders of Christ. Don't miss out. Click subscribe now.